So it's the NFL football season. John Madden coached the the Oakland Raiders for a period of time. Something fascinating about John Madden. He won a Super Bowl in 1977. They beat the Vikings, but he would not fly on an airplane.
No.
And he ended up having this van that he would go to all the games. He was a famous announcer for a long period of time. He was one of the best. I mean, everybody knows John Madden. I mean, you know him because of the video games. And also, he was a great coach. He was actually a player. But why did he not fly? He was on a really bad flight, and he felt isolated. And he just decided that after that bad flight in 1979, that was after he stopped coaching. He quit as a coach in 1978. He decided he'd never fly again, just determined to never fly again. And now there's a lot of things that aren't great in your life when you don't face your fears. We're going to talk about that today in this episode of the Decide Your Legacy podcast, Courage Over Comfort, Growing a Pair. Yes, I'm going to tell you why I'm calling it that later on. When we do coaching with businesses, we get to see fears come out. Now, people have fears that may seem irrational to us, yet they're very rational to them. Somebody can be afraid of giving a performance evaluation, being open with other people, having a conversation even, giving feedback, having an awkward conversation, one that you don't feel like you're totally prepared for, letting go of perfectionism. Going to your high school reunion can be a fear. There's a fear of flying that people can have, fear of public speaking. Those are some of the common ones. Today, in this episode, I'm going to share with you a therapy called exposure therapy that has very good empirical evidence that helps people. And I'm excited about this episode. One reason I'm excited is this is a fun topic where people can get results right away if they start creating a plan to do some things to face stuff in your life. And leaders have to face things in order to grow. There's no way actually of doing it, of growing, unless you're going to face something. The moment you recognize something is triggering you, there's a fear there. It gives you great evidence. So, and as you go in this episode, if you find it helpful at the very end, listen all the way through. You're going to find some really helpful tools. That's my guarantee to you if you listen all the way through. Now, we've had some kind of cool breakthroughs recently. We had almost 2,500 downloads last month, the best month ever of the podcast, so 2,470 to be exact. And at the end of the episode, give us a rating and review, share it with a friend, spread the word so it continues to grow and help more people. That's what happens when you give it a rating and review on Apple or Spotify. Other people pick it up. It comes up naturally in the feeds. And that's happening right now. It's getting momentum, and I need your help because you guys listening, most likely in the next week or two, are faithful followers who are already engaged, already find it valuable. That's going to help it reach more people. And to start, there is a lot of crap in the therapy world. I've been a licensed mental health professional for over 25 years. And I see good stuff. And I see a lot of crap as well. I see stuff where it isolates people from, it divides families. So for example, I was a speaker at an event not too long ago. And one of the people that was at the event, it was all mental health practitioners. So they were psychiatrists, psychiatric ARNPs, nurse practitioners, therapists, psychologists, a big group of people, and I was a speaker. And afterwards, there was a discussion. We had small breakout group discussions. And a person shared how they were not going to share with parents some really significant, important information that the child had shared with them as the therapist. And it just rubbed me really the wrong way. And then they were defensive about it, so, and there's this elitist mentality, like we know better than a family. So I'm all about the family. I mean, the family is the unit that is the foundation of society. We need to build other people up. We need to build marriages up. We need to build parent-child relationships up. There's a lot of brokenness there. There's way too much fatherlessness. There's way too much divorce. I mean, these are big problems. So, but today, I pretty much believe none of you are going to disagree with the usefulness of this specific type of therapy, this modality called exposure therapy. And exposure therapy, it gradually exposes a person to a fearful stimuli in a safe and controlled environment. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to engage in it. It doesn't mean you're going to want to do this. It doesn't mean it's going to be fun, but it's going to be practical enough that you can walk away and say, as a leader, I can take action. That's going to help me grow.
Right.
And Today's episode, I have a guest. His name is Sherman Orr, and he's been on a couple other episodes, so I think you're going to find him extremely helpful and insightful. He's a legacy coach at Decide Your Legacy, an insightful leader. He's going to share his life experiences as well. And I'm Adam Gragg. I'm a family therapist, and I'm a legacy coach. So I founded Decide Your Legacy in 2012. At Decide Your Legacy, we help businesses and leaders live courageously. So this goes right hand in hand with it. So anybody listening that's been a client, heard us speak in the past, gone through one of our online courses like Shatterproof or Tune Up for Life, you already know this stuff. It's going to be a refresher, but you're going to find it very fun and helpful today as well with the illustrations. I have real client illustrations I'm going to share. And by the end, as you go through this content, you're going to be thinking of an area of your life where there's a fear as a leader that you're probably not facing, and create a plan. You're going to get to devise a plan as I share plans as examples of what we would give a client to engage in to face the fear that they have. Every episode, I like to share something that I am struggling with, that I took at least a small little step or didn't take a small little step. So both Sherman and I are going to share something. And what comes up for Sherman is, I'm just kidding. What comes up for me is, and the reason we want to share a fear we've faced or tried to face, maybe it didn't go well, is that I don't find much more important to your mental health than being willing to step into those scary things, and much more damaging than avoiding and getting no new evidence, not seeing that I can actually approach something differently and have success. So when I am in anxiety triggering social situations, sometimes I'm having a conversation and something will remind me of a bad experience. So I had an experience where I was exposed to a triggering situation. It was like sometimes people that can remind me of somebody else. So it's kind of weird, but if I can recognize it in the moment. So there was a situation that triggered me based on interactions that I've had with my mom that had been discouraging, and another situation that wasn't with my mom, and I love my mom, but it triggered me in a certain way, and I was able to not run from it and actually engage it. And I have to go into a lot of detail to explain, but I was able to recognize the fact that this wasn't the situation I was in. It was just reminding me of a situation in the past. And that led me to feeling encouraged afterwards because I stuck with it.
Yeah. So actually, I think back to an incident that occurred to me when I was very young. And of course, in grade school, there's folks who are bullies and whatnot. And I remember being held by a bunch of guys over the stairwell into a deep, dark hole. And it just scared the living daylights out of me. And from that day forward, I have been afraid of heights.
Okay.
And so I've just made a commitment that I am going to try to overcome it. I still remember, many years ago, I went to Paris, and I went to the top of the Eiffel Tower, and it was just glorious seeing all of Paris, France. And as I started walking closer to the edge, my feet stopped moving. I don't think I got close, and there's a nice fence around it, but I probably couldn't get closer than 4 feet to that fence. And I was like, this is good enough. All right. And it stuck with me my whole life. I'm still there. I do take some attempts.
So that was why the invitation to go skydiving is not as exciting to you.
No. Well,
it's partially related to this fear of, I get you.
Yeah. I've done some other things that.
Okay.
But
so
no.
we've been talking about doing a staff and client skydive day for a while, and I've challenged Sherman to do it. And if he doesn't, at least go out and cheer us on, and then maybe he would do it at another point, but maybe not. It's fine if you don't. It's fine if no one has to do anything like that, of course. But if that's actually a good example that we can discuss today, how I would devise a plan for somebody that said, I really want to skydive, but I'm terrified of it, or how I would devise a plan for somebody, how we would devise a plan for someone with a fear of flying. So we'll give you some examples of that. So my struggle here is that my mind goes to mush when I'm triggered by certain fears in my life. They generally are relational, related to embarrassment or rejection. And I can't think straight. It goes fight, flight, freeze mode. I freeze a lot of times. I don't have anything to say. I lose my creativity, and there's real science to that, because when you're in danger, you don't need to be creative. You need to be protective, because you have legitimate danger. Your brain is very efficient. It conserves energy. Blood flow goes to when you're in a fight, flight, or freeze mode, it goes to the extremities where you can fight. It goes away from internal organs. Believe it or not, your breathing actually increases. There's certain things that happen when you're afraid that are predictable, really. So breathing deeply is a great practice because it's the opposite of having a fight, flight, or freeze response. And so, got any stories about your struggles here? More?
Yeah, actually. So sometimes I'm a jokester with people in very, very subtle ways. And so one time at one of the schools I was at, the kids kept bringing it in wolf spiders. Just about this time of year, wolf spiders are everywhere, and they are trying to find some place to live. Well, they would capture them, put them in a terrarium, and then they would die within a week. So I thought, to be nice to these poor kids, I'd go buy them a tarantula. And so I went to the pet store and I walked in and I said, I want to buy a tarantula. And she said, okay, sure, it's $20. And just out of the blue, I just said, well, how do I know if it's a male or female? And she said, looked me bold in the face and said, well, if it lives for a year, it's a male. If it lives for 20 years, it's a female. Mr. Fuzzy has been alive for the last 7 years now.
All right.
So I'm also, as most people, terrified of spiders, and especially big spiders like the rose tarantula I bought. And the teacher, though, to get back at me, said, well, since we know it's a female, you are the one who gets to clean out the cage. So it was my job to clean out the terrarium. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to capture the spider, put it in another terrarium, clean it out, and then let her back out again without her biting me. And it took me probably a month to get to a point where I could put her in another container, take her out, and then clean out the cage.
Are you less afraid of cleaning the cage now than you were when you first tried?
Oh, yeah. I did it every year for the next 7 years.
So you've done it multiple times since then, got better and better at it. Yeah.
Yep.
So 3 principles that relate to exposure therapy. So basically 3 principles for you as a leader that if you're going to face something, you're afraid to give a performance review. That's a real situation like that I had to deal with a leader recently. Or you're afraid to have a meeting and run it because you think it's going to just kind of go haywire. People are going to just, or you're fearful of having a conversation with your sibling that is calm because you believe that you're going to blow up or you're going to shut down. You're going to have that fight, flight, or freeze. So you today, as you're listening to this, identify something as a leader that you're putting off, you're holding off on, you're not facing. And as we go through this content and these 3 big principles, you're going to unpack it yourself and create an action plan as we go. So first principle is you take baby steps. One of the reasons people are terrified about some phobia in their life is because they are going all or nothing. They're going from A to Z. So they're thinking if they're afraid of spiders, that in their mind, if they were honest with themselves, they're picturing themselves getting bit by a spider or actually being in a room covered in spiders or being involved, being locked in a closet with spiders. It's with a million spiders. I mean, it's this extreme type perspective that causes the fear. And we find ways to help people break it down into manageable steps that will these baby steps incrementally expose them to this specific fear. For example, somebody's afraid of public speaking, another common fear. Yet they want to excel in their career and they realize, which this is really true, that public speaking is often a very valuable, necessary leadership skill.
You have to have it as a leader, especially in today's world.
You have to have it as a leader, and you will never be replaced. I mean, it's a valuable skill that can never be replaced by, I don't believe, by AI in any way, because if you speak, you're connecting. It's like a good book is connecting with somebody. It's like great art. If it's not created by the human soul involved, then it doesn't connect people. That's what art does. Art connects people as they engage it. It breaks down barriers. We can all admire it or not admire it, but we can still appreciate it together. So you'll never be replaced because you can speak from the heart, and you're touching as you do something courageous, AI could never replace that, because it's an internal, it's like an aspiration. We can't replace certain human characteristics that involve connection. So what I would do with someone public speaking, for example, is we would break it down into 10 steps. We'd say, okay, well, what is, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10? One is very little fear, or a very marginal amount of fear, and 10 is just absolute terror. I could never even think about doing that. So with public speaking, it could be, speak to 5,000 people for an hour on a topic that you're not even really passionate about. I mean, hopefully you would never do that as a speaker, and you probably never would, because why would you speak on something you're not passionate about? But I mean, it could be this terrifying thing. But now, what would be a 1? Well, it could be just reading an article on public speaking skills and 10 tips. Although that might not terrify you, for somebody that wants to move towards being a better speaker, that could actually be scary for them. And then we don't judge them on that. We want to make sure that we're creating a plan that they can look at and say, yeah, that's pretty scary, but it's not that public speaking to 5,000 people. And so step 2 could be watching a TED Talk, and then actually taking notes on what is this speaker doing that seems to be helpful and engaging to the audience. So listening with intentionality for the purpose of growing as a speaker. Step 3 could be writing down a list of illustrations from your own life that could be helpful events to somebody else and connect information to other people. Step 4 could be make a list of life experiences that are kind of embarrassing, that you wouldn't want to share necessarily, but could be helpful. And then you create this plan. I mean, it could go to the point where you volunteer to speak to your team on a topic that relates to the team
that you're passionate about. Yeah.
That you're passionate about. And then you go from there. So I'm putting you on the spot, Sherman, but what would you devise as a plan if someone came to you as their coach and said, you know what, I've wanted to do it since I was a kid, but I'm terrified of heights. I was on a bad turbulent flight like John Madden, and I don't ever want to be on a flight again, but I want to skydive before I die. And they're 65 years old, and they have a health issue that is threatening their life, but they want to do it before they die. So what steps would you tell them incrementally to take?
I would, first off, with your first rule here, our first principle is, what baby steps do we need to take? So maybe the first baby step is getting him to an airplane, walk around an airplane, go to an airport, look at things, check things out. Then maybe the next step, watch some videos on people that are doing some parachuting. See how much fun they're having. Engage those kind of things, and just slow steps. And I would really coach that person to say, what do you think the next step would be that would really get you there? That might be another help. And I know that, like, oftentimes when they do parachute jumps, they'll train you on a ladder first. And so, okay, let's get up to the top of the ladder, and we're going to jump into a pit, whatever it happens to be. And keep working them. Incremental
steps.
Baby steps.
That you are taking little wins that you can grasp. And you would be surprised how much this already happens in people's lives, yet they have not identified it as exposure therapy. A good example is parents whose kids are afraid to eat certain foods because they look strange, or because they were told they were gross, or a parent who has a child that's afraid of a dog.
Oh, yeah.
Because they went to school, maybe some kids were talking about dogs being bad, or maybe they have a parent, because our parents do environmentally inherit, I would say, they inherit our fears. So we have to be careful, because if we're really negative as parents about tomatoes, there's a good chance that because you have this tomato phobia, which I have a very good friend named Donovan who has a tomato phobia. He really does. And I tease him about it, but he literally, because he had a bad experience with tomatoes, and anyway,
let's not go there.
It is funny, and he may be listening, because I'll have to tell him. But yeah, you start to develop a plan. And if somebody, I'll give you another example here. So if somebody's afraid of being open with other people, because as a child, let's say they were open about their struggles and they were invalidated, get over it. Don't be a wuss, like get over it. Or their siblings did that, or they were teased and made fun of. Like maybe they held you over a high space,
right?
Threatened you, and they thought it was fun. And some kids would just bounce back from something like that. But other kids, depending on the situation and how trapped they felt and their maturity level, could be scarred by it. So, and you were impacted by it. And so let's say they want to be more vulnerable. And I talked to a client just even today about this. So what steps would we take? Interestingly enough, things can be with this whole, vulnerable is probably not a great word. I would say available. How can you be available to other people? Be open. Be open to other people. Because they're afraid to be open. Why? Because they've been hurt in the past. So what step one could be just, and I did this today, actually. It was interesting because step one can be to apologize. And that really not a huge deal, but it could be just to apologize. Step two can be to say no to somebody when they are pushing you to do something with them and you don't want to. Like, hey, let's go out to lunch. And you're like, no, I'm going to stay. I want to eat my own lunch. I made lunch and I'm going to stay. And they are afraid of doing that. That's being open with somebody. Step three can be to tell somebody that they did something really good and you really appreciated their help. And you may not think that is vulnerable as a listener right now, but that can be vulnerable to somebody else. So don't judge. Things that are open can be very different. Step 4 could be do something intentionally embarrassing. Legally intentionally embarrassing. So you're intentionally going up to somebody in a coffee shop and saying, hey, what do you read? They're reading a book and you're like, hey, what are you reading and how is it? And when you do that automatically you can already predict that you're going to feel very much embarrassed by doing that because you've done something before and it just is terrifying to you, but you go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool thing. And then step 5 could simply be do the opposite of how you're feeling in a situation socially. So you feel like going and, hanging out at it's a corporate event and it's a networking event and you feel like being the guy who goes and talks to his coworkers. You feel like because you're safe with them, but you do the opposite, which would be not talk to your coworkers and talk to somebody else. Right? So you just go, if you're bothered by something, that's a real great thing for you to do. Is if you recognize that you're bothered by something, you should ask yourself, first of all, what's really bothering me about this? Because there's something about the situation that's bothering me about this. And then what would I do here if I wasn't bothered? And then be honest with yourself enough to say that I would do this, and then that's very different than what you normally would actually do. So you do the opposite of what you would do when you're bothered. So you, as the listener, think about ways you could start devising a step-up plan, starting with the lowest hanging fruit, the least terrifying actions, the ones that are still scary, and then going to the one that actually is the result that you're looking for. So ultimately, you had a fear of flying. We'd get on a plane and fly to Denver. And I've done that. I seriously have done that with clients in the past. So done things, and I love that part of my job is we get to go and do the scary things that they're afraid of public speaking, so we will go and actually participate and be there to help them out. Super cool, fun stuff. Like it's one of the things I love about coaching and the whole, it's like the actionable, let's go out and do it kind of stuff. So the second key principle is ignore your feelings. That's going to sound contradictory. Yes, I am a therapist and I'm telling you to ignore your feelings. Now, I'm not telling you to ignore your feelings in all situations. I'm telling you to ignore your feelings in situations that are highly triggering, to the extent that they're dictating what your behavior is going to be. Ignoring does not mean acknowledging. Ignoring does not mean being aware. Ignoring does not mean saying something is real or not. Your feelings are real. They're just not reality.
Right.
In that specific situation. So when my mom, at one point, believe it or not, I had this happen. So my mom told me to grow a pair. She did. And she did it, and it was exactly what I needed to hear from my mom. Thanks, Mom. She told me to grow a pair, and I was struggling emotionally, and I was struggling with challenges related to my divorce situation, and I was just at my wit's end. And it was like, hey, you got to deal with it. You got to face things. You can handle it. We believe in you. We love you. That kind of thing. And it just said, you got to step up. You got to step up.
Yeah, it doesn't invalidate the feelings. The feelings are there.
Yeah.
But you can't be steeped in those feelings. Don't just sit there in that feeling because you're not going to take that first or the second or the third baby step.
Absolutely. You're going to go ahead and do it anyway. You're going to feel the fear and you're going to step into it and you're going to do it anyway. And you're going to realize that as you do it, which is this facing things incrementally, that's when you get the evidence to realize you can handle more and more and more. And you'll be energized by it. I promise you that. I promise you. It's like the results of somebody that can, first of all, the first step is willingness. Okay, so you will not do any exposure therapy without willingness. No one's going to force you to fly, and you're going to overcome the fear. In fact, it's going to get worse. If I decided just out of the blue, because you came to me saying I have a fear of flying, I want to get over it, and I kidnapped you and put a bag on your head and threw you on an airplane, and I said, you're going to do this, whatever, I would make the problem worse. There has to be a level of willingness, but that does not mean you can't be a creative parent who can manipulate in a healthy way to encourage willingness. All right. So you can do that, because if I have actually paid my daughter to introduce herself to people, and I've actually paid my daughter to do things like have a conversation with her teacher when she was afraid, and she became willing because I was able to convince her that the benefit was greater. This was when she was much younger. The benefit was really great in the process. And I don't regret doing that stuff, because I feel like it built courage into her.
Right. And for your first example, you go back to John Madden. He started driving to his different gigs in a van, and by the end, and he never faced his fear of flying.
Never faced his fear.
And what did he end up with? He ended up driving a huge bus everywhere.
He did.
His fear, actually, it's a great metaphor for his fear. It got bigger and bigger and bigger.
And more expensive, and then it limited his opportunities. It's interesting that his flight was in 1979. He quit coaching in 1978. So I wonder if that impacted him taking another head coaching job.
It could have very easy.
It could have very easily, because maybe I can't imagine being a head coach of a football team and actually not, because whenever he was a head coach of a football team, which he was the head coach of the Raiders for a decade, I can't imagine you not flying when you're the head coach of a football team. I can't, because you getting to games, and sometimes you have a Thursday night game and a Sunday game. You got to fly. I mean, so, and they could be different parts of the country. So, but I don't know. That'd be interesting to see. And fears are real, man. I mean, they're scary. So now for us as coaches, if somebody gets in a car accident, I'm going to encourage them to drive as soon as have the health to drive, to not wait in the process. Or if they had a heartbreak with a gal and they say, I'm never going through that again. No, I would say, hey, let's figure out, do you want to be married again, or do you want to find somebody to have a romantic relationship with? I would say, well, let's find a way that if you can at least be around women, and interact. If it's a man, obviously. If it's a woman, a man, be around. Right. You can at least be around some good, healthy, quality people. Go to church, a singles group, be around some people that you can interact with. You can start getting evidence that this is not reality. This is not reality. It's real because you have the feeling of reject. You don't want to go through it again, but it's not your reality, because there's a lot of people who would not reproduce that situation for you.
Right. So here's the next question: is, are you always going to be able to do it? Are you always going to be successful in your baby steps?
Are you always going to be? The answer to that question is yes, if you go take the first baby step, which is willingness, and the plan is devised in a way that's realistic.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and this is great, because there is a famous experiment that indicates the reality of this. So, it's famous in my head because I just read the book that told me about this experiment, but it is interesting because we had a conversation about it where people have they're actually terrified of spiders in this experiment. And what they do is they first of all agree to be in an experiment, willingly saying to this group of, I believe it was psychologists, I'm not sure what university, but it was, I'm sure some reputable, it was in a reputable book. I mean, the book's called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, and they're researchers who write, they're journalists. I trust their journalistic integrity. So, but they have these people willing to go through an experiment to overcome their fear of spiders, of tarantulas. It's spiders, but spiders a big tarantula, right?
Right.
Yeah, good. I mean, in some countries they probably eat tarantulas. That would be an interesting thing, and that's a different type of fear than being in the room and actually eating one. Although that could be like
tasty.
Step 10, like eat a tarantula. And so, but so in this experiment, they all agreed. And then at first they were trying to see how close they could get to the tarantula's cage, and nobody could get within 10 feet of the cage. And then they had this 14-step plan that they agreed to follow. And step 1 was go and just be 5 feet from the tarantula's cage. Okay, they can go ahead and do that. And step 2 is to actually put your hand on the tarantula's cage. it's like a glass terrarium. So there was a barrier, you know. And then step 7 was, I think, guide the tarantula with a paintbrush, like touch it with a paintbrush, you know. And then step 10 was like actually hold the tarantula with a really thick leather glove. And then eventually step 14 in this specific experiment was they would actually hold the tarantula on their bare palm. And of all these people who willingly, with the support of this team, and that's really crucial, is you have a supportive team. I wouldn't recommend you try this on your own. So these are people who understand how to guide someone through exposure therapy, which is crucial. I would not say that everyone could do it if they have the willingness, if they didn't have the right people devising the right plan with them. But that's not to say that you can't devise your own plan. I would just encourage you to get some feedback on it from a trusted friend. Do you think I could do this? Or to talk to a coach or talk to a counselor and get some feedback on it. And then 100% of the participants that were willingly participating, they actually were able to hold the tarantula in their hand, and they were actually able to do it a year later, 100% in this specific case. So kind of a cool thing. But that's step 1, is you got to grow a pair. And first of all, when you start taking the baby steps, it's going to trigger emotions. When you grow a pair, you're ignoring your feelings. You know, this is not just for men. I know it's for men and women. All right. So we figure out a way, and we have the willingness, we have the power to ignore our emotions in the situation and do the next right thing.
We're in control.
Yeah. And for some fears, there's no reason to actually do anything to deal with that fear, because they're rational fears. They're a rational fear to actually have a pet possum that has rabies. That's not a good example because possums don't have rabies. But to actually have a fear of a dog with rabies is not something you should ever overcome.
Right.
Right? It's just not something you ever... To have a fear of being locked in a porta potty for a week by people, you know, with bungee cords is a pretty healthy fear to have. You're probably never going to have it, but it's, you know, you don't want to have that happen. That would because you would die. So, okay, those are rational fears. We're talking about irrational fears in this situation. So you ignore your feelings. One of my favorite quotes of all time, Carl Jung, where your fear is, there lies your task. So think about that, man. You got fears. Fears are a blessing. And this, again, sounds contradictory. So ignoring your feelings does not mean admitting you have them. It does not mean you admitting but you're ignoring them in the moment. You're not letting them drive you. My family would say, and has said at times, that Adam, you're too sensitive. Adam, you're too sensitive, you know. But what they're doing is invalidating me, because what I'm talking about in those situations is just an uncomfortable topic that I'm actually bringing it up.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess I'm sure I can be too sensitive. I mean, I have challenges emotionally at times, but they also tell me good things like grow a pair. Now, a book called Grit by Travis Bradbury addresses this pretty well, and it's another good book. It does a lot of research on people that have grit, so endurance. They're willing to push through, do some stuff. So there's some principles out of that book that help me, and I do have this on a one-page handout that my personal coach gave me one time, actually front and back. And so a couple of those things. People have grit when you have grit when you have to have grit. You have to fight when you already feel defeated. You have to learn to delay gratification. That's ignoring your feelings.
Right.
Absolutely. You have to make mistakes, look like an idiot, and then try again without flinching. Interesting. Try again even though you look like an idiot. You mess up, you fess up, you try again. That's a big deal. That's grit right there. You have to lead when no one else actually follows. It takes grit to do that, because your emotions are going to be telling you something very different. You're not leading well, or you're making a mistake, or listen to all these people, but you have to lead at times when no one else will actually follow you. You have grit when you have to be kind to people who are rude to you. Interesting stuff. Who are actually mean and nasty. And you are kind. It doesn't mean you're not assertive. It doesn't mean you're not firm.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're not saying I have a boundary here, but you're being kind. And candor is kind. Interesting. Candor is actually kind. So the third principle, which I find for me personally is the most encouraging of all of these principles, is to expect yourself to fail. Expect yourself to be in situations as you go through this exposure process, as you ignore your feelings, to fail, to make mistakes, for it to be sloppy, for you to go and say and decide to lead a meeting or go through one of these steps and it not go very well. Expect it so you're prepared. That's what we're talking about, is you can do things to prepare yourself to be courageous in advance.
Right. Exactly. That's what you have to, that preparation is part of it. That first baby step, and maybe step 7 is doing that preparation and getting in there and doing it. Because like you say, and that's really what my first question is that really don't worry. It's going to be sloppy. You should expect to fail, especially on big issues, on big fears that have controlled you for a long time. But that doesn't mean you don't take that next little step. You don't want to be frozen there.
Yep. Here's what happens so over the years, with clients, one question I'll ask is like, what's your biggest fear? What are you most afraid of? And then leave them with that. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? When people do that, they always want me to elaborate on these questions, these open-ended questions. They want me to elaborate, and I don't elaborate, and that really makes them uncomfortable because they are wanting me to give them something that they can grasp as maybe that should be my biggest fear. What have you seen in me? But no, I want them to sit with it and think. Because when you think, you use a part of your brain that's not emotional. It's rational. You go much deeper. You go much deeper because you're not emoting. I mean, that's the primitive brain, the lizard brain. It's like the amygdala, the dubla oblongata. Or maybe that's wrong there. Don't quote me on that. But you start to think, and then they identify something as they think. Like, that's a fear. I'm afraid of being embarrassed. I'm afraid of rejection. I mean, I'm afraid of isolation. I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid of, it could be something specific. And when they go through that process, then they're able to identify something that they're afraid of, and it's like, okay, now what do I do with that? So, and I don't give them exactly and don't tell them exactly what to do, but people will often want to not fail again at something as driving them towards this fear that they have. So something bad has happened, and they don't want it to actually happen again. They don't want it to be in that situation again where they're going to feel that feeling again. And that's really crucial to identify. But if you go and say, yeah, I'm going to do this thing, and this fear is holding me back. I've identified that it's actually holding me back in some way, and it's okay that I step into it and I don't do it perfectly, and I'm not going to do it perfectly. And they're giving themselves permission in advance to be uncomfortable and awkward and have those strong feelings and to ignore them. Super powerful.
Yeah.
It distances yourself from that specific situation. It's like you're able to externalize it, and it's not you any longer. It's not you any longer. But it's a really crucial thing to be able to admit and say, hey, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of having a bad relationship again. I'm afraid of having a bad coworker that could be whatever to me again, like the one in the past. I'm afraid of it. It's very crucial because there's power in that externalization of whatever that fear is. So how do you, well, the point, one point I was going to make though about that actually is when somebody's really quick to say, I'm not doing that, or they're really quick to say, I don't have a fear here, I don't have a fear there, or if they're talking about leading, let's say, a meeting with their team, and they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Then what I hear there often is they're not willing to even think about it with their prefrontal cortex. It's very emotional because they're so quick. It's better to say, if they can pause for a second and then regroup, then I have a lot more confidence that there's not like an issue that's being avoided in that situation. Because our job as coaches is to go to the core where people are held back so they're facing that, and then they can have long-term change, long-term transformation. So that quick reaction is often crucial. So if they do a self-assessment and they're quickly saying, this is all great, I'm doing fine here, I'm doing fine there, it's like, okay, you're not thinking here, and I can't necessarily tell them, well, you're wrong, but
right,
so,
you're not being honest
like,
in your self-reflection.
It's like, how's it going as a parent? Well, it's great, it's perfect, everything's great, or how was your childhood? And if anybody's honest with themselves, they're going to have something that they can share that probably wasn't the best about their childhood. And it doesn't mean they didn't have great parents, but that really they're putting a caveat to everything. It's like there's some reason they have to justify how things are okay, and they're not going deeper. But that depth is how people grow, because then they're facing the stuff that's holding them back. You got to go deeper.
Yes. And I love I hate to say it, I love my example of the tarantula, because I can use another example here is that it took me a while. I failed several times in trying to clean out that cage and take the lid off, because they can jump and all these things. And also, you should know, unless you've had a tarantula from as a baby, you're not to touch them. You're not to carry them, because they have to be used to humans from the very beginning. If they are, you can hold them and all that good stuff. So I knew this guy was not used to humans, and so I was afraid of all those things, but I slowly got over it. And then at my house, I went to the backyard the other day, and I noticed this black quarter-sized spider right at the water where the spigot is. And it was a black widow spider.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I saw, as soon as she sensed my movement, she went back behind a little electrical box that is literally 3 inches from that spigot that I had to turn on. And so I was like, dang, that's kind of cool. I didn't see these very often when I was young, but I was able to reach down and not have that fear that she was going to jump out and bite me.
Okay,
just like turn it on.
That's a big deal.
But I mean, if I hadn't faced that fear with that tarantula a long time ago, I would have had to call my neighbor to come over and turn on the water.
And that would have been a reminder of something to face.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Continually. Yeah, that's pretty. So I got to share a couple things with you here in closing. People don't admit to themselves when they're afraid. And that is where I'm a big fan of talking about stuff and being open. So if you think of when you're available to life, when you're open to life, you're going to see opportunities that you didn't see before. You're going to see employees that are the best employees that you turned down because you weren't open. You're going to get stuck in rules. You're going to get stuck in these isolating things. Like people are distant from others that have differing opinions of them because they're afraid. And you could incrementally, I was talking to my friend this morning who's a politician, and he's a fairly well-known person in the area where we live here. And so we were just talking about how there's so much fear. Like he was going to interact with somebody, and they had this perception of another person. They were going to have a group conversation with differing political opinions. And he was sharing with me that the other person described the third party as being hateful. And I thought there wasn't a chance for dialogue because we were already demonizing and we were distant. Mm-hmm. And so those fears isolate people. They cause resentment. Resentment is driven by fear. I don't want to get hurt again, so I'm going to resent them. I'm going to hate. And we have a society right now that scares me in a way because we sense people's distance at a greater and greater level. Yet we, as an audience, if our fear is to engage people and to have conversations, we have to be the ones that go first. And that's going to trigger a fear in us, but we can start the dialogue. Mm-hmm. And we can engage. And so that may not be, that's one example right there. But I was talking to another client recently, and he has a fear of being open with people, and it impacts his leadership at times. And so we started to create a plan incrementally, but one thing he identified in the process is that he has this fear of reading out loud. And he's been in business meetings where he has to read something out loud. He's a very articulate guy. He's a very smart guy. I didn't realize how much of a fear that was. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was probably firing somebody, which can be terrifying to someone else, could be like a 10, but for him, that would probably be like a 3, and reading out loud was like a 9. I mean, very terrifying.
Wow.
Yeah, and he reads to his kids, and he says that in itself is uncomfortable as well. And I said, well, what's that all about? He made this connection. It was an aha moment. He said, well, I had a parent growing up who was hypercritical of me and my reading, and I had some challenges with reading, and I go back there emotionally, I believe, is what he said, I believe, to this place when I was a kid where I guess really criticized. And he made that connection. It was like a huge breakthrough. I mean, I felt like this was like a game changer. I'll share this with the whole team. It's like, wow, I got to remember this. And even I said, can I share it in the podcast? That was so relatable, and part of his plan was that he's a leader of a division of a company, is that he's going to do some teaching at the beginning of meetings, like do some reading at the beginning of meetings on content that can be helpful for the team and to be able to share it. And again, he's really articulate, but that's very highly triggering. He's available to his team, available to criticism, available to being sloppy. I mean, available to actually messing up. So if you're going to work on a public speaking fear, you have to be available to the fact that it could be kind of messy. It could be kind of not going as well as you want. And we can make progress. So I'm so excited for you today. Again, so excited for you to face your fears. I mean, it energizes me to hear stories about what you have done. If you're creating a plan, share it with us. Share it with us. Respond to the video. Respond in the comment section. It'd be really great to hear your example there. And, we hear some common examples from famous people, I think oftentimes. I know you were talking, you were sharing one with me that you hear a lot about how you face things incrementally. I don't know if you want to share that, Sherman. The one.
Which one?
Oh, the one about Michael Jordan.
Yeah. So actually, you think about some of the, like you said, the famous people. We know them because they're famous, and we think everything was just roses and flowers for them. But most people probably don't know that Michael Jordan was cut from his sophomore basketball team. That wasn't that good. But what did that do? The fear of getting cut again, he didn't stop. It just inspired him to work all the harder. And there's a great quote I love from him, actually. It's like they're asking about how great you are, Michael. And he goes, in my life, you have to recognize I've missed 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost 300 games. And on 26 separate occasions, I was entrusted to take the game-winning shot. And I missed them. I have failed over and over again, but I didn't ever stop. And that's why I succeeded. The fear of being a failure as a basketball player, it could have very easily ended many other great people's careers, but he was one who faced that fear, got back up on that horse, and kept riding.
Yeah, and that's a big example. I don't like the famous examples nearly as much as the real world examples personally, because I can't relate to that as much because he's had a lot of talent as well. But the talent developed out of him not giving up, and so he just had this real persistent mentality. Yeah, and so we get to see as coaches, we get to see the little things people are doing. They're not little things; they're big, they're huge. I find them to be incredibly inspiring. Whether that's somebody talking for the first time about trauma they have in their life, whether somebody for the first time actually stepping out in a leadership role and leading and going against their feelings, someone actually becoming an engaged parent or husband and mending relationships that are broken with their family. I got to see just this week family relationships restored and engagement and communication just improved. And that gives me so much hope. And they all did the same process. They were willing to be expose themselves to more and more of that thing that they actually fear. And so that's my hope for you, the listener, that you can be just like my client who is going to start reading out loud more to his team. So what's it going to be for you today? How are you going to do this? So the principles to follow: exposure therapy, exposing yourself to your fears so you can become better and bigger leaders. So take baby steps, small steps, little wins. Ignore your feelings, grow a pair. Right there. And then that's number 2. And then number 3, third principle, expect to fail. Be prepared for that as well. So check out this content, Shatterproof Yourself. It's this course that I've made for you. It's on 7 small steps to a giant leap. These are all mental health principles. If you found this helpful, you're going to find that even more helpful. It's free. You go through it in 25 minutes. It's got a worksheet that you fill out, 7 actionable items. You can apply it right now this weekend today. By the end of the day, you can do something. You're going to make progress if you go through that content. So based on this content, challenge for you, what was most helpful and inspiring for you? You're going to devise a plan to face that fear? Are you going to take that first step of that plan? Are you going to talk to a friend about a fear? Are you going to admit to yourself that this is holding me back professionally by having this fear of public speaking, by having this fear of leading, by having this fear of running a meeting, by having this fear, this perfectionistic mentality about when I do things and not letting it go? What are you going to do? 80% of long-term transformation is action. You're doing something different. You're facing something. And 20% or less is insight. You gained insight today. Now, what are you going to do with it? To decide means that you're eliminating other options. And your legacy is the impact that your life is going to have on other people. Live the life today that you want to be remembered for 10 years after you're gone. You decide your legacy, Sherman. You decide your legacy, Troy. You decide your legacy. Nobody else. I appreciate you greatly, and I'll see you next time.